Hello and welcome to our latest and greatest edition of Better Together Arizona. I'm your host, Angela Hughey. So happy and excited to be joined by my dear friend, Michael Soto, the president and CEO of Quality Arizona. How are you today, my friend?
Good. It's so good. I'm always good to be here with you.
Ah,
So anytime I get to start the day hanging out with you,
oh my
I'm better.
gosh. We like to do these early in the morning.
do.
We need to have a lot of energy
Yes.
to talk through the issues that are currently going on in our nation and in our state.
Yes. And I don't know about you, but by like 4 o'clock every day, my brain is just
I
exhausted at
get
this
like
point.
a little mushy. I'm like, the
Totally.
dots aren't connecting
Yeah.
anymore. Definitely. So I'm
Yeah.
like,
Like I need to take a break.
Yeah, totally.
Yes.
And today, of course, is another big conversation. I think what we're realizing is we're going to, like, every couple of weeks, we're going to keep giving our listeners and our viewers, like, an update on
Yeah.
how things are going and where we're at when it comes to issues that concern our LGBTQ plus and allied community. And so this is like our update 2 months in. It
I
is
love it.
hard to believe that we are just a little over 60 days in. It
Wow.
feels like it's been a little longer than 60 days.
Feels like it's been a year. I feel like a year worth of things have happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do too,
Yeah.
definitely. I told our team that like I'm going to be cursing for the next 3 years and 9 months.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I
Often.
think passionate profanity is good though.
Absolutely.
Right? It helps us
Absolutely.
get
You
through
just got to
it.
kind of get it all out. So
Yeah.
anyway, I'll
Exactly.
try to refrain from too much profanity on during our conversation today. But
Okay.
okay, so we are just a little over 60 days into the Trump administration.
Mhm.
Can we talk about like the changes that we're seeing in everyday life and how these changes is really impacting the daily lives of Americans?
I think that's such a good question. So I think one, the federal government feels very unstable right now, right? It feels unpredictable, it feels unstable, it feels like they don't quite know what they're doing.
They're making plans for war on a
On a
signal chat.
exactly. Like they're showing us
They seem
that
a little out over their skis.
way out over their skis,
Yeah.
right? And it feels like there isn't a captain steering the ship, right? Like that's a little bit what it feels like. It's kind of like who is actually
Are we going to have tariffs? Are we not going to have tariffs? Are we
Yes.
going to, are we trying to invade our neighbor,
Right.
Canada?
Right. Which, oh
Just,
my gosh,
you
how are we
know,
having that conversation?
it's just
Right.
remarkable to me right now. Like it's
Yeah.
just, I mean, I know that this was part of the strategy, right? To
It
just
is.
like come in and throw everything up against the wall
Yeah.
and really put, I believe, the American public like back on our heels, right? Like
100%.
there's
Yes.
so much coming.
Yeah.
Like I keep calling it acid rain, and you're just
Yes.
like you're trying to like miss the raindrops,
You are.
right? And
Yeah.
not get hit.
Yeah.
And I think in any rainstorm, you are inevitably everyone is going to get a
E-
little soaked.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's what's happening. And it is intentional. I'm really glad that
Yeah.
you said that because it is. I think what we're seeing in the federal government right now is a sowing of chaos intentionally
Very
so that
purposely.
Americans and everybody else in the world, right?
Yep.
Our allies and our enemies don't understand what's happening, when it's going to happen, and why it's happening. And we're seeing this from from the signal chat and planning war to layoffs and
Yeah.
and Doge, right? Where you're fired on a Monday, you're rehired without knowing you've been rehired on a Tuesday, you're
Yeah.
fired again on a Wednesday, and then you're rehired again on a Thursday. You know what I mean? Like it's like,
Oops, that
yeah,
wasn't
like
constitutional.
sorry, that was not the right thing to do. Also, you actually run things that are absolutely essential to the American people. We need you to come back. And so we're seeing, this intentional chaos, this lack of efficiency, this lack of effectiveness, but it is on purpose. And
Right.
in part, it's to sow some fear, right? Both in our population and around the world. It's also to sow uncertainty and
So that we all just get in line, right?
Right.
So like we just put our head down and like,
Yeah.
like we don't even know what to object to or what to have a conversation about because
Exactly.
we're just getting hit with so much that
Yes.
I mean, the intent is silence.
It is. The
right?
intent is to overwhelm, to make people feel so unbalanced and uncertain that we can't react. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations because information alone isn't enough because there's so much information. We have to make meaning of the information so that people know how to act
Well,
and
and I
what
think
what to do.
in our hope with these conversations is that we're going to cut through the noise, right?
Exactly.
So I think
Yes.
we really want to give our listeners and viewers good information
Yeah.
so that they can so that their anxiety levels can come down a little bit.
Yes.
And I would say so far, the judiciary is doing its job,
Yeah.
and also that there's processes, right? Like
Yes.
we still live in a democracy.
We do.
You do have to abide by the Constitution, although
Do.
this new administration is doing everything they can, I think, to really, really test the bounds
They
of
are.
the Constitution.
Absolutely.
Um, but
Yep.
I think like the last couple of weeks have actually been in the midst of all of this chaos.
Yeah.
I think that there's some rhythms that you're starting to see. And one of those, like, let's talk about the 5 anti-LGBTQ, in
Yes.
particular, really anti-trans executive orders that have been issued by the president. Can you give us an update on where they're all at?
I absolutely can. So we did a deep dive on them weeks ago, which
Yep.
was great, and I hope it helped people understand what the intention of those executive orders are and the potential impacts. And so we're several weeks out
Yep.
from that, and we're actually seeing the impacts, and we're seeing how the blessing of having three branches of co-equal, three co-equal branches of government in our country helps in this process. And so the executive orders, let's start with the first one,
Right.
right? So the very first one was the one that essentially introduced this unscientific lack of,
This
this
definition of sex, right?
exactly that denies the reality of the human diversity of sex, but this new definition of sex, and it had an impact specifically on things like passports and federal ID, right? On for transgender and intersex people, and making it impossible essentially for us to change our federal ID to reflect who we are. Also impacted inmates in federal prisons, right? People being held in federal detention centers and federal prisons. And so we've seen multiple challenges to that first executive. And so let's see, let me count. So there's one, two, sure I got it. Yep, one, two, three, four on for the first executive order, just for people
So
being
these are
held in.
4 legal challenges.
Four legal challenges, but only on one aspect. So there's actually several different pieces of this executive order that are being challenged in different ways. So these are the challenges to people being held in federal prisons and detention centers. And so there are four just on that alone, four
Okay.
cases that have
Because
been
it's
filed.
really dangerous, right?
Very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous for transgender people to be held in facilities with cisgender people inappropriately, right? And so it puts transgender over and over again. We see this. It puts transgender people, our bodies and our lives in danger, in physical danger of assault, of sexual assault, right? Of being murdered. I mean, I don't know if people know this, but there are 3 international projects that are dedicated just to tracking the deaths of transgender people because we are murdered by
Because the
cisgender people.
violence, it
Yes, is so pervasive. And I do a whole presentation on this, but it's horrific ways. Like we are beheaded, right? Like we are burned to death. Like we're killed in horrific ways that most people find terribly shocking and should, because it's inhuman, right? The way that transgender people are treated. And so that's why it's really important to house us correctly in any situation, but especially when we're vulnerable, right? And to make sure that we are safe. And so sometimes, depending on the facility and how the facility is set up, the safest way for transgender people to be housed is not with anybody, right? To have a different section of the whatever facility, whether it's a homeless shelter or a prison, where trans people are, instead of integrating us into cisgender populations. Sometimes, if it's done correctly and in a respectful way, we can be
the
integrated into
integration
the
happens.
appropriate cisgender population. But cisgender women should never, or transgender women should never be housed with cisgender. That will always put transgender women in grave
And is
harm.
that so that's what this bill is trying to do
Yes,
in prisons, right? Is
exactly.
try to take transgender women,
Yeah,
and house them with
with
cisgender men
cisgender men.
in
Exactly.
a prison facility.
Exactly. Yes.
It's not too far to you don't have to be like, I think, relatively
Right.
imaginative
So
to see the harm that
yeah,
can be done there. And
immense harm. Right. Yeah.
and it also is trying to take transgender men
Yes.
and house them with cisgender women.
Right.
And
Which
you can see that it doesn't work
it
in
doesn't
any
work
way, shape,
either.
or like,
Exactly.
I never number 1, I never wanna see you go to prison, but number
Right.
2, should you be
Right.
in a facility for some unknown reason,
Yeah.
you should be housed with men,
Right.
or you should
Or I
be
should be
housed
housed separately so that I'm
separately
safe.
so that safety. Okay.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
this is
So
trying to deny those 2 things.
yes,
Got it.
exactly. So we've got 4 challenges to that, and we have so courts can do something called preliminary injunctions or a stay, right? Where basically they say, hey, okay, the plaintiff, like the people bringing this case, have proven that something's kind of wrong with
This is
this.
problematic. So
Yes,
basically, they're saying we're going to put the brakes on this executive order taking
exactly.
effect.
Exactly. And
Okay.
that could be for many reasons. It could be civil rights violations. It could be cruel and unusual punishment, which basically all of this part falls under for trans people. Or it could be unconstitutional, right? It could be an overreach of executive authority. All of these things are true, right? And so, for many reasons, a judge could say, hold on a second, we're going to not let this go into effect because I think there's something wrong here that we're going to find. There's enough evidence,
Okay.
right? That basically they're anticipating a ruling of this isn't
So
kosher.
this
This isn't
first
gonna happen.
executive order has been
No.
stayed.
So the inmates and uh, detention facility part of it has been stayed, but also the passports. So let me get to that section. There's so many. I've got many pages here.
The notes.
So
And like you're like a
there's
font
lots.
6 on these. There's so
I
much,
know.
so many notes, and they're so tinily
So
written.
that's why I have my glasses on. So I got to be able to see that. So there's one case right now about the passport part of like the federal identity part, the documents part of the first executive order. There is not so there. Yes, there is a preliminary injunction on this one as well, and that was on February 18th. The judge in this case in Orr v. Trump granted that preliminary injunction, and
Okay.
so multiple, and those were kind of the biggest, sort of areas of the
Of concern of these
yes,
of this first executive order.
yes,
Okay.
that have come to fruition already. There's also another area where in the executive order, I know there's so much in each of these, it's wild, where the Trump administration basically ordered every agency in the executive branch to ignore the Bostock ruling and to, in fact, do the opposite of the Bostock ruling. I'm certain that we will see that in as there is a case that materializes, but
Right.
you have to have a plaintiff, right? So you have to have someone that says, hey, actual harm is happening to me. So when there are plaintiffs, when that happens, when the federal agency
We've always believed that they were going to go after Bostock,
100%, well, we
right?
knew they were,
Yeah.
right? They've said they're
A-
going to.
And
So
and for our listeners and viewers, and I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but Bostock was a 2020 decision
uh-huh.
that brought federal employment protections to gay and transgender employees
Yes.
that work for businesses that have 15 or more employees,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
So federally, if you work, no matter what state you live in,
Yeah.
if you work for a large employer
Yeah.
and you're a member of the LGBT plus community,
You have employment
you have
protections.
employment protections,
Yep.
just like people already did, under current existing civil rights law from
Yep.
1964,
Yep.
Based on a number of
Yeah.
reasons: disability, age,
Race,
race, religion,
all sorts of things.
all of the other
Yep.
protected human characteristics,
Uh-huh.
right? And the Bostock ruling really said that sex is protected, right, under the Civil
Yes.
Rights Act,
Yep.
and the definition of sex essentially is an umbrella term that covers sexual orientation and gender identity.
Exactly.
Because the only way you can discriminate against an LGBTQ person is employment
Yep.
is indeed based on their sex.
It is.
Got it.
Absolutely. Yes. So that's another piece of it. And as the plaintiffs emerge, I'm certain that we will see cases challenging that aspect of that
We are
executive order as
never going to
well.
get a week off on this podcast.
We're just really
gonna-
not. We're going to be really busy for the next 4 years.
I think
This
so.
is all I know right now. So then, okay, so we had after that. So that's the first executive order. We got a lot of challenges that are in the
Got it.
works. The majority of that executive order that can be challenged, that actually is something
Is
that
being challenged.
exactly, and
Anything substantive is being
yes,
challenged in the first executive order.
exactly, including as a part of these that definition, right? That's a core part of what's being challenged. Is like, hey, this definition actually doesn't reflect the human experience of sex and gender. So
Got it.
yeah, we gotta talk about that.
Okay.
So okay, so if we move on then to the transmilitary ban, right? So this is also being challenged in court. There are 1, 2, 3 cases where service members have been able to bring a successful case to the federal court system and are challenging this. And in 2 of them, there are injunctions or stays. So right now, that basically, and the latest one, the Ireland, the Hegseth, this one actually was not just challenging the executive order, but challenging Secretary Hegseth's memo and process that he outlined to oust existing service members.
Right. Service members that have been in the service for like a
for their entire
decade
careers,
plus, right?
sometimes 20 years. So, I mean, who knows These are people.
I think I was reading something last night, and there was like 2 service members,
Mhm.
and they were, like, both on assignment. I think they were in the Air Force, right?
Yes.
And they
Yep.
were called one was called back from Afghanistan, and I
Yep.
think the other person was based in Europe
Yeah.
somewhere,
Yep.
right? And they were called back to, like, their home bases.
Yep.
Uh,
Anticipating discharge. And these are people that are highly operational, right? These are
yeah.
people that are serving actively in war zones, right, or in
So, I
intelligence
mean, can we talk
capacities.
about that and, like,
Yep.
just military readiness,
Oh,
right?
we
Like,
have to.
when you are taking,
Yeah.
existing military personnel and
Yep.
removing them,
Yeah.
simply because you don't like them,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Not based on their ability to do their job.
Right.
It seems to me like you can be putting, like, whatever, troop that they're with and whatever the assignment is at
Absolutely.
risk, number
Yes.
1.
Yep.
And then the second thing is, like, I've read a number of articles to say like the military is having some difficulty in recruitment,
Hmm.
right? So
Absolutely.
why it makes no sense when you have trained and educated these military personnel, they are in the field doing the jobs that they've been trained to do,
Yep.
and you're pulling them away from whatever their assignment is, number one,
Yep.
and you have a military, so that's a military readiness issue, and you have a
Huge.
military that is having just an issue with recruitment right
Yeah.
now as well.
Well, and I mean, you think of this. So, for the general population, only a small percentage actually are eligible ultimately, whether that's through education, through health, right, through any of these different factors and screening processes. Like, you have to go through a pretty lengthy process to join the military. It's not an easy process, and only a small percentage of the general population makes it through from the initial screening process through boot camp, right, through all of the different trainings that actually get to the point where they become members of one of the armed forces. So you've already got a tiny percentage of the population that's willing and able to do that, right? So now you've got this amazing, community of transgender people who have dedicated their lives to serving in the armed forces. You've already gone through all of that process. They've gone through all the screening from health to mental fitness to education, then they've gone through the physical, sort of processes of boot camp and training, the intellectual process of that, not to mention the tax dollars that have gone into
Yeah.
training these amazing individuals who've dedicated their lives to serving this country and all of its citizens. And then you're just going to cut them out of the military because they're trans people? I mean, these are people that are doing every kind of job, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's people from, drone operators to people commanding forces in war zones. Like, if you take a commanding officer out of a unit, that's a huge problem if they're operational in the world, like even if they're not, like the unit cohesion, right? The trust that they've developed in that commanding officer, right? In their unit, you're doing a huge disservice to our armed forces
And to the
and to
people
Americans.
that they are hired to protect and serve, which are
100%.
everyday Americans.
And in a time when there is a greater threat to national security and sort of precarity for security in the world in general,
We're making decisions to bomb people on signal right now.
which is insane and wrong. And showing, ultimately, it tells me, are these the right people to be making the
I mean,
decision of who should
we
be
need
in the
to talk about
military?
merit,
We
right?
do. We
Like,
do.
because we're these people
Yeah.
hired because they were qualified
Right.
to do the jobs that they've been hired to do.
Well, and I think in Secretary Hegseth's, case, absolutely not, right? That seems very clear. And when he is getting to make the decision, someone who was given a position because he was liked by our president, and pushed through the congressional process because the president liked what he said about him on Fox News, that's not merit, right? That's not earning that position or being qualified for it. And then if he gets to make the decision of people who have spent their entire careers in the military, been trained for decades to do their jobs and are
And
doing
by
those
the
jobs
way, have been
well,
given those jobs in those positions based on the merit of
yes,
doing the
they
jobs,
earned
right?
those
They've
jobs.
earned the
Yes,
right to have the positions that they have within the military. That
exactly.
is merit-based hiring.
That's merit-based hiring. They've earned it the whole way, right? They went through the entire process. They weren't given a pass on anything.
No.
They earned every step of the way. They earned their position. We're talking about highly decorated people with security clearances, people that have been doing their job in the way that it needs to be done for years and years. And to fire them based on ideology is crazy and a
And
horrible
puts
blow to
America at
national
risk, I would
security.
say.
I
Yeah.
agree.
I mean, I would just say it puts everyday Americans at greater risk
It does.
because it harms military readiness.
It does.
Yeah.
And it harms national security ultimately, right? Like it just makes
I
no
mean, I use
sense.
Signal all the time. Who knows? I might be finding out about some things that are top secret. I
Right.
mean, who
We
knows what I'm going to find on Signal?
yeah, be careful what chats you accept, you
I
know?
yeah. Wow.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay.
But the good news is that we have 2 injunctions
Right,
against
and I think the
that.
judge is like, I think that this is about equal opportunity and equal equality in
Yes.
employment, and like this is deeply problematic.
Well, and the judges in these cases have actually said, not only that, but they've said the language of this executive order is highly prejudicial. This is
Yeah.
basically it's all ideological, it's all opinion, and the facts don't support it, by the way, because we do have
Yeah.
tens of thousands of service members who are transgender who are serving with distinction, right? So that's important as well.
Okay.
Yes. All right. So,
Executive order number 3. Next
yes.
up, the medical care ban for minors and young adults.
Let's do it. All right. So this one has one, two. So this one has 2. So it has 2 judicial challenges right now, and one of them, nope, both of them. Sorry, both of them have preliminary injunctions that have been
Okay.
granted, and so this, like
There's a
the
stay.
others, there's a stay and saying, hey, this we're not, this doesn't, this executive order doesn't pass muster, essentially.
Well, and so correct me if I'm wrong.
Mhm.
My understanding is to change a person's medical protocol abruptly for no reason
Mhm.
can cause medical harm
For no medical reason,
for
right?
no medical
This is an
reason.
ideological
This is an
reason.
ideological reason.
Yes,
So to change a person's medical protocol for no medical reason can cause harm to the person that is in treatment.
of course. I mean, think
Yeah.
of any course of treatment, right? From allergies to heart disease to cancer. It's some random person coming in and saying, I don't think you should get the medical treatment that you have right now. That's going to cause harm,
Well, I
right?
mean, I mean, I had a health journey in 2023.
Yes,
I can't, I'm trying to like, I know it's not totally apples to apples, but I'm imagining myself in the midst of my treatment. The treatment is working.
yep,
There's not a medical reason to change my treatment. And then
exactly.
all of the sudden, I stop going through the treatment plan that I'm on.
Right.
And like, I mean, I'm healthy because I went through the medical protocols that I went through.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. And I mean, we know that our bodies are systems, right? And so when you're undergoing treatment, you ramp up treatment, right? You
Yeah,
go
you
through the
can't just
process and then
abruptly quit something.
you can't not, there's
It
like
can
no
cause
medicine.
seizures, like, I mean, it
Yes.
depends on what the medical protocol is, but a
Right.
number of ill effects, adverse effects can be caused.
Enormous
Yeah,
adverse effects. I mean, think of just the normal processes of things like puberty and menopause and how intense those processes are on your body, right? That's hormones. If suddenly you don't have access to those hormones, I mean, it causes
yeah.
all sorts of different systems in your body to go out of whack and has all kinds of unintended harm. And it makes no sense. So,
Okay, can I just say, like, I know we've got 2 more of these executive orders to go through, but
yeah.
overwhelmingly, I think there's one word that describes all 5 of these,
Hmm.
executive orders, and that's just cruelty.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
This is all just meant to be intentionally cruel.
It is. And it's meant to be intentionally cruel, and it's meant to just cause irreparable harm to
Yeah,
trans people. And it's all based on this ideology that says that trans people aren't real because there are people in society that don't want to believe they're real, which is just wild to me. I don't know of any other population where there are people not of that group of people saying you don't exist, right? That's not real. You're not
no, I like there's
it,
a vilification and
yeah.
there's this othering that's going on to such extremes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've just never really seen anything like this.
I know, it's shocking, right? It's just and even more shocking because people like me didn't stop existing when Trump signed these executive orders. We're still here. We still exist. We still need medical care. Still need jobs, right? We need housing. Just
And
people.
you're Americans, and no matter who you are or how you identify or who you love, we have the right to the pursuit of happiness, right? Like
Exactly.
that's what it is to be American,
It is.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is yeah, I don't have words for a lot of this.
Same. Same. It is awful. So okay, so then we have 2 more. We've got the schools executive order, which I'm not aware of a plaintiff being brought forward yet. So I think that's one executive order where we're yet to see a judicial challenge. But I'm certain that we will, right? That executive order was so ideological and really just kind of a rant ultimately that I think it's
So
hard to
remind
operationalize.
folks what the schools in transition executive order was about.
So this executive order basically said that, said all the sort of inflammatory things that the other ones do about trans people, that we're not real, that we're mentally ill, that we're sick, that we're,
Yeah.
all of these sort of old ideas. And then it also said that in schools they're like not allowed one to medically transition children, which doesn't happen in schools.
It's a
That's not
school.
a
It's not a medical
right.
facility.
Exactly. So there's that. That's not a thing that was happening. But also that schools are not allowed to support the social transition of anyone, or even not even social transition, but just not allowed to use a different name than the legal name, right? Or to use respectful pronouns, or basically it's, sort of saying you can't be someone who works in a school and respect your students, which,
Okay.
is awful, and just cruel again.
Cruelty. Yeah.
Yes. So that one, I'm sure we will see plaintiffs emerging for this again. To bring a case, you have to be able to demonstrate the harm, right? And so some of these will happen faster than others. But the last one, the sports ban, the trans sports ban, we do have one challenge for. This is not there's not an injunction yet, but we do have a motion for that. Um, so we will see in this complaint. This is a newer one. It's also the last executive order
Okay.
that impacted trans people specifically. So we keep watching these.
So you
These
kind
are
of think
developing
over time,
constantly.
the third and fourth will likely have plaintiffs and go through the judicial review process,
Oh,
right?
definitely,
Okay.
definitely. Yeah, I think all. I mean, I think we're seeing that essentially every executive order that that President Trump has signed is being challenged over time. But organizations have to find those
But
plaintiffs and move
this
forward.
is a good civics lesson for the
It
American
is.
public, right?
Yes.
Because I
Yep.
don't think, like, I mean, again, I think you have an administration that is really trying to take more power.
Yeah.
And there's supposed to be three co-equal branches of government,
There are.
right?
Yes.
And yes, Republicans have the majority in the House and the Senate and seemed very much, right now at
Right.
least, aligned with the Trump administration.
Yeah.
But then you have the judicial branch of government,
Do.
which really seems to be doing its job.
It is. And, the federal court system is huge, right? So I've got notes here. Just we can go over kind of what that system looks like just very quickly. We've got trial courts, right? So the district courts, we've got the appeals courts, and then we have the Supreme Court, right?
Okay.
And so when an executive order is challenged, it goes through those different levels of federal courts. And so there's 94 district courts, 13 appellate courts, right? And then the Supreme Court. And so that's a lot of process to go through. These challenges that we just talked about, we're going to see this unfold over
And are they
years.
they're at the
They're at the very
district,
beginning.
so
Yes.
they're at a district court level?
Yes. Yeah. So they're at the very first level with one judge. Then you go to the appellate court with three judges, right? Typically three judges. Yes. And then the Supreme Court. So
So there's stays on the first three of the five anti-transgender executive orders. And this process from district to appellate all the way up to the US Supreme Court could take,
years and years. This could take a very long time.
could it go beyond this current administration's 4
Absolutely.
years?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I
Yes.
do want to remind our viewers and listeners that the current president only gets to be president twice.
Exactly.
So
For
he's
2 4-year
done in 3
terms.
years and 9 months.
Indeed, and that is in the Constitution. So this is
This constitution thing is really, really starting to play an important role
it
in
is.
how we run this country.
It really is, and as it should, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Pretty
I feel
important.
like we are, I feel like Americans are getting a civics lesson,
Yeah.
and we're really learning about all of the levers of government and power and
Yeah.
how things work. And I'm grateful to the framers for wanting there to be three co-equal, and I think it's
Me
important to
too.
say co-equal
Yes.
over and over again.
Yes.
You don't get to, repeal a judge or impeach a judge just because you don't care
Exactly.
for the ruling.
Yep.
There's a process that each of these go through.
And there should be, right? That's
Yeah.
very important to ensure the rule of law and the Constitution are being upheld and respected by our government. I think the American people are getting a civics lesson, but if I'm frank, I think that Mr. Trump is getting a civics lesson as well, just as he did in
I
his
can't
first
just do what I want to
administration.
do.
Exactly. He's not a king, right? Like he doesn't have
No, he is
unlimited
not a
power.
king.
He is bound by the Constitution and has a specific role to play. So he can issue executive orders that, do not abide by those bounds, but
They'll be
they'll be
challenged.
challenged
They are
and
being
ultimately they'll
challenged.
be found to be, unlawful.
Okay. So we've talked about the 5 anti-trans executive orders.
Yes.
Now let's go to the legislative branch,
Let's do
right?
it.
And talk about there's specifically a few anti-transgender bills
There are.
that are moving through the House right now.
Yes. So let me forgot to print that one up. Sorry.
That's okay.
So there are 34 bills in total that are just kind of concerning in terms of um, the LGBTQ community and the greater community in general. But there are, in specific, several bills that would impact largely trans people, but could impact the larger LGBT. So, and these are lots. They cover a wide range of things. Some of
Sure.
these are anti-DEI, like we're seeing here, right? But there are several specific, including the Protecting Women's Private Spaces Act. So there's actually two. There's the Stop the Invasion of Women's Spaces Act as well. Both of these are essentially bathroom bills at the congressional level, at the federal level, which is just, I mean, talk about an inappropriate use of the federal government, right? Do we need to be
Well, no, but it's
legislating
ridiculous. But
bathrooms?
like, I mean, so you have 20 states that have LGBTQ inclusive statewide policies in place that include
Mm-hmm.
employment, housing, and public accommodations.
Mm-hmm.
There's over 300 LGBTQ inclusive municipal ordinances
Yep.
in our nation, including 11 in the state of Arizona.
Yep.
There is zero uptick when you have inclusive policies in public spaces that includes restrooms and locker rooms
Yeah.
of anyone doing harm,
Right.
right? Because it is unlawful to
To
harm
harm people.
someone.
Yes.
And that doesn't change
No.
because we have equal access to facilities.
Exactly. Well, and something that really stands out to me, all of the arguments that are used around that are cited for keeping trans people out of bathrooms, public restrooms, essentially are that cisgender men do harm to women, and we want to keep cisgender men out of women's spaces. And it's like, yes, everybody wants that, transgender people included. Also, that's not about trans people. So if your issue is that cisgender men harm women, work on that. That's not
But
transgender
that's
women.
not what LGBTQ inclusive policy
It's not.
touches in any way, shape,
It
or form.
doesn't at all. It's
So
an
it seems
entirely
like
different issue.
it
That's
really seems
that's
like our lawmakers need to have a civics lesson as well.
well, absolutely, and they need sort of a lesson in understanding what issue they should be working on. I think also if safety is the main reason, as is often cited for these kinds of bills, then let's talk about safety for everybody in
Yeah.
bathrooms because everybody deserves safety. And targeting one population, we saw the same argument around safety was used to have racially segregated bathrooms, right?
Well, it always comes down to the restroom,
It
right? Like,
does.
because I think people think that we're vulnerable.
Yeah.
And just the introduction of these executive orders and
Yeah.
like the current environment we're in.
Yeah.
There was an issue a few weeks ago down in Tucson at a
Mhm.
Tucson Walmart,
Mhm.
right? Where a
Yep.
young woman went into the Walmart restroom to use the facilities. A team member at the Walmart called the Pima County Sheriff's Department
Yep.
and said a man is in the woman's restroom.
Yep.
We found out about this because the woman posted on TikTok. She said she had to lift her shirt
Yep.
to prove that she was a woman, and she's like, "I'm a woman. I'm in the proper facility, right?"
Yeah.
Like the so the idea is this is going to protect people,
Doesn't.
and it didn't protect this young woman who
No.
had just gone into the women's room to do what women do when they go into the women's room
Use the
to use the
bathroom.
restroom,
Exactly.
right?
Yes.
It's really, yeah, it's concerning.
Well, and we see this pattern over and over again, right? Laws like this actually make cisgender women less safe in bathrooms and expose them to more intervention by the state through the police than is necessary in their private
Well,
lives
through the police and then also through the general
and through the
public,
general
right?
public.
Because
Absolutely.
obviously, a member of this Walmart needed to call someone.
Right.
It need to call law
Yeah.
enforcement.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and it makes the
it's
general public feel like it's your right to police other people's gender expression ultimately, which it's not.
Right.
Like, I don't get to tell you how to dress, you don't get to tell me how to dress, right? Like,
Right. She
we
wasn't
get
the
to
most
make
feminine
right,
young woman,
right,
right?
exactly.
But
And she has a right to not be.
she
Yeah.
presents however she chooses to present herself.
Exactly, and
Yeah.
it's none of our business,
Nope.
right? It's hers. And so it's just bad policy all the way around, and it doesn't make bathrooms more safe.
No.
That's the thing. Like, if we wanna have a
Well, you've
safety
got that
discussion,
issue,
let's
and then
do
there
it.
was an issue that with a lesbian couple who was like
Yep.
driving through the West
Yes.
Valley at
Yeah.
an In-N-Out burger, and just a customer came up and like physically and verbally and physically accosted these
Them and their
two.
daughter.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you see the video, and the young girl is like standing in the hallway crying. She's
Yeah.
terrified,
She
right?
is.
And this customer is verbally berating
Yep.
this lesbian couple, saying that they're sex trafficking their child
Right.
because they are walking their child
To the
to the public
restroom,
restroom,
as
right?
any parent
And
does that
and
I know.
here's what I don't get, like, why is that okay?
Yeah.
Why is it
It's
okay
not.
that this person, verbally and physically accosts this couple, right? Like,
Mhm.
she pushes this
She
couple,
does.
like, she physically comes at, this family,
Yeah.
and why is nothing done there, right?
Exactly.
I feel like, actions speak louder than words,
Yep.
right?
They do.
And if there's not consequences
Yep.
for a stranger coming up to a family
Mhm.
and verbally and physically accosting them,
Yeah.
then what we're saying is that behavior is okay.
Right, and it's not. It's not okay in a civil society, right? That's not how we treat each other, and there should be consequences for that woman.
Yep.
And bills like these two, right? The Stop the Invasion of Women's Spaces Act and the Protecting Women's Private Spaces Act do not help. They embolden people like that woman,
Well,
right?
the employee that
Yep,
called the local sheriff's department, the
exactly.
woman who I guess is in there to get a burger,
Yeah,
but took it upon herself to police this family,
I can't even
right?
imagine. So, like,
No, it's
it's
horrific.
horrible. Like, wow, it's just shocking, right? But our Congress is emboldening that kind of behavior. There's also a sports ban, a trans sports ban at the federal level, and it's called the Protection of Women in Olympic and Amateur Sports Act. So again, why is Congress taking it upon themselves to try to legislate amateur sports?
When are we gonna like the price of eggs is pretty crazy.
Yeah, yeah,
We may be going into a recession. Like
mhm,
I'm just kind of curious when the government is going to actually start serving the people
yeah.
and stop just really terrorizing and focusing on a
Trans
vulnerable
people,
population.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, terrorizing is the right word, right? There's another one called the Guard Act. So this is guaranteeing unalienable and anatomical rights for Dependents Act. So essentially a medical ban, and it's really egregious, just like the executive order, because it conflates gender medical care, right, transition related medical care, to things like genital mutilation and to doing that kind of harm and sort of just deeply disturbing things instead of medical care. And so, it's not right. It's not genital mutilation to transition. It's not forced upon people, right? It's not any of these things that the far right
And
wing is trying
so
to make
much of
it.
this seems to be about surgery. And
Yeah,
am I correct that it is very rare
very
that
rare.
a minor
Yeah,
would have surgery
very
uh,
rare. Yes.
when they transition?
Yes, it's even rare. I mean, current studies are showing not only is surgery rare, but cross hormone treatment, even puberty blockers are relatively rare. I mean, most trans kids are not undergoing any kind of medical treatment. They're going through social processes, right, and family support, mental health support. But the medical treatment in general is rare, and surgery is very, very rare. So it,
Yeah, it just seems to me like the American public, like we all need to be better educated
we
on
do,
these things.
we do.
And I want to believe that most people have good intent.
Yeah,
I feel like we're just not educated
yeah,
and we don't understand gender identity.
right.
And that folks that are anti-LGBTQ have done a very good job,
Yeah.
in particular, of villainizing transgender youth.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that, like, our opposition that actually truly believe that transgender people do not have a right to exist as human beings, um, they are ascribing to a highly right-wing ideological understanding of sex and gender that basically says denies the reality that trans people and intersex people exist and have
Right.
always existed, and says actively that we should not exist. Like, there are people in their camp that have called for the extermination of transgender people, and so it is so extreme, and these laws facilitate that kind of extremism because they say that we don't have rights as human beings, and we know that any society that starts to say this kind of human and this kind of human don't actually have rights, that's how you pave the way to atrocities. So we have
So
to
I
be
think
very
it's important to
vigilant.
say something. They are
Yes,
not laws.
they're not laws. These are
They are
bills.
bills.
They're bills that have been proposed, and they're very unlikely to become laws. And that's because, and we have to thank Senator Sinema, Kirsten
Because
Sinema, for
there's a
this.
filibuster in the Senate.
Exactly. So, Senator Sinema, I know people were very upset with her during the Biden administration, but because she would not cave in and allow the filibuster to be
And her point at
gotten
that
rid of,
time was, I understand that you don't want there to be a filibuster, so you just
right,
wanted there to be a simple majority,
right,
so 50 plus one
yep,
vote.
hmm
And that makes sense when you
when you have
when you
power,
control the levers of government. But
yep,
the reality is the filibuster exists
you won't.
because you're not always going to
Yes,
control the levers of government,
exactly.
and you want there to be a higher threshold
Yes,
for a bill to become a law.
exactly.
And so
And
that number is 60 in the Senate.
it is. And so, and a part of the tradition of the Senate, because it's a smaller body than the House, right? The House is a
100 people.
huge body, right? It has a lot of people in it. You can't have unlimited debate when you've got hundreds of people, right? But when you have 100 people, you can have this tradition of let's have as much debate as possible, because the philosophy of the Senate has always been through that debate, through that discussion, we're going to get to better policy.
We're going to find the things we can't agree on.
Exactly.
And we're going to make amendments.
Yes. And we're going to work together.
And work together to find the things we can agree on.
Yes.
And that's what's going to move forward.
Exactly.
And so again, I feel like we all need the civics lesson. So the bill starts in the House in this particular case.
Yep.
It passes through the House as is. It comes to the Senate where it is heavily debated. There's an ability, obviously, for amendments.
Right.
It has to pass a 60 vote threshold.
Right.
And if there are amendments to the bill, then it goes back to the House, right? Because that amended version of the bill has to pass the House.
Exactly.
Prior to making it to the sitting president's desk for signage.
Exactly. And so that 60 vote threshold, so that's called the cloture vote. And so what that actually is, it's a technical vote that says this debate and amending process is over, and now it's time to actually start the process.
This is the real vote of votes.
It's the vote to allow a vote to happen.
Okay.
Which is a strange procedural thing, but it's really important. It's basically saying, okay, the filibuster is over, right? The endless debate is over. Now we're actually going to get into the voting process. So that's that 60 vote threshold.
Okay. And
the truth is that these bills, unless Democrats start defecting, right, and saying
they're not going to get the 60 votes.
Exactly.
So right now, these bills are fundraising bills.
They 100%.
Okay.
They're ideological bills and fundraising bills, right? And they're ways to spread.
We do not think have the opportunity to pass.
Exactly. But they are a threat in the spreading of false information and dangerous ideas,
and
emboldening
emboldening people to, again, you've got the issue with the young woman in the public restroom at a super center, and the couple trying to get a burger.
Yeah.
Okay.
They embolden that kind of behavior.
Right.
Exactly.
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
So that is our federal update.
That is our federal
feel like
update.
I want to end there because this is so much for our viewers and listeners to understand.
Yeah.
I know we had talked about getting into what's going on locally.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's so much federally that we've just updated folks
Totally.
on.
We might have overwhelmed folks.
Let's give everybody a break and an opportunity to understand all of the things that that we've talked about. I want to throw something out there too.
Yeah.
If anybody that is watching or listening Better Together Arizona has ideas on like show topics that they're interested
absolutely,
in, drop us a line at info@onecommunity.com. That's info@oneCommunity.com.
Yep.
And we'll discuss.
We will.
Bringing the topic up on the show.
I love it. I love that. If you have questions, right? If you're like, hey,
let us know.
I still don't understand this, or I don't understand this bill, or, whatever it is, whatever process it is, we can cover.
Let us know, and we're happy to answer those questions. Thank
Love
you
it.
as always, my friend. So good to see you.
Thank you for having me on. It's so good to see you too.
All right.
All
Until
right.
next time, we'll see you soon.
Awesome.